my fellow panelists and heroes from the movie to introduce themselves. Abby, would you like to start? Just a word or two about yourself.
Sure, but I am not a hero. I'm an ordinary person. So first I want to say that. I am a mom. I own a little small house painting business. What else? I live with my husband and a 19-year-old daughter who's about to go to college. And yeah, just an ordinary mom.
Thanks, Abby. And how about you, Michael?
Yeah. And Sue, who was in the movie also. Former mental health counselor, worked out in the woods and the mountains and the deserts for a little bit with some young people who needed mental health assistance. And that was many, many, many years ago. And got more and more concerned about climate over the years, and started asking, what does it mean to help people become well adjusted inside a pathological society? Couldn't fully answer that question. So doing less and less mental health until I was done, and I graduated, and I'm I'm now just a volunteer, but just kind of an average guy, grew up middle class, Is there anything else interesting? Not really.
Here's something interesting.
So here's Sue.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sue, and I started my activism career as a kayaktivist with Backbone. So that was really fun to be able to relive 2015 when we were all out in kayaks. And I'm the co-founder of Climate Action Families. It's a small little nonprofit to help amplify the voices of youth and bring families together around climate change. And one of our programs, youth leadership program, is Plant for the Planet. And that's the organization or the group that Aji and Adonis, who were in the movie, were part of, and kind of learned how to test their activism wings. So I'm just happy to be here today. Just wanted to hang out with y'all, and we don't get to be in movies every day together, so it's kind of a fun thing to do.
It is a fun thing to do, and we're glad you're here, Sue. Thanks for being with us as well. Just so people at home know the way this is going to work, I'm going to throw some questions toward Michael and Abby, and they can ask me questions, and Sue, you can get involved in that too if you wish. But the audience, you at home, my Granny friends, and probably some other folks that have purchased tickets through the Grannies, are free to post questions about anything that's related to the movie or anything you need to know about us or what we're about. Put them in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll cover as many of those as we can get to. And I made a list of questions that I want to pose to Michael and Abby, so I'll be doing that as well throughout. And we're going to be here for about an hour. If we feel like sticking around that long, it's going to be very informal. So let's get started. I'm going to ask both of you to answer this question, and being Michael and Abby.
I feel like we're on Jeopardy or something.
Yeah, really, okay.
I just know there's no prizes. There's no prizes.
Oh.
If you could go back in time, knowing what has transpired, would you do it again? Abby?
Do you want to go first, Abby?
Sure, of course I would.
I know you love to go.
That's one of the happiest times and the most exciting things that's ever happened to me. And doing it, I was so surprised by the coverage and how suddenly I became like in the spotlight and answering the questions, which was the hardest part, is to be a spokesperson for all of it, because that I wasn't really trained to do, and I've had to learn along the way. But climbing the tripod and having people that I trusted anchoring this tripod, and all sorts of people surrounding and supporting. There were just not hundreds, it felt like hundreds, lots and lots of people witnessing it. Michael came and brought some of the Plant for the Planet kids. My dad was there. It felt like community, and we were all risking something, but we were all protecting each other and trying to point the finger on, hey, we need to protect what we love. So it was a beautiful action. And I feel like the people that you thought were not going to be, that you thought were going to be your adversaries ended up being like my partners. Like my arresting officer, I just adored. And they tell you not to talk to the police or talk about your action. And so when I was getting arrested, the Officer Randall Mars, he had to put my seatbelt on, and I saw that he had these bracelets that were handmade by, you could tell, girls, because they had girl names on them, like little dice that spelled out their names with like pipe cleaners or whatever. And so I knew he was a dad, and he ended up saying how proud he was of us, and it was a very respectful, and I think his mind was opened up. I don't think he was against what we were doing, but he respected the fact that we respected all the people that were there. And so I felt like that was really a great experience. So yes, I definitely am glad I did it.
Would do it again. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, it's complicated because I was risking potentially the rest of my life in prison. And so it comes back to, doing it again. So I took the action because it was absolutely necessary. It was absolutely an emergency. Everything else I'd done had not been anywhere near sufficient. Anything anybody was doing was not sufficient. Anything Obama was doing was not sufficient. And I think that's probably what I need to say in answer to that question is, we will not stop this machine playing by the rules. The rules are all made to destroy everything alive. Period. The end. That's what the rules are for. Because the only reason we need these rules is to protect property and to protect money. Otherwise, we don't need very many rules at all. So I just feel like, yeah, I would definitely do it again. Definitely do it again. No regrets, even though I would probably do it differently and try and find a way to make it more effective. Try and find a way to get 1,000 people to go out and do the same thing the next day.
Yeah.
Because as long as we go home, things won't change. If we keep coming back persistently, constantly, until somebody says uncle, then things change, but not until then.
Not until then. Yeah.
Well, Sue, I wanted to know, how did you feel about Michael doing this? Were you angry, worried? I mean, I'm sure you had a million, but how did you deal with that? And how supportive did you feel? I mean, of course you believe in the cause, but there's like so much.
Come on, Abby, way to pick the scab.
No, really.
It's been years. I've been in the doghouse, and
been in the doghouse. No, I didn't. He didn't actually tell me about it because he didn't want me to actually, have the information.
Yeah.
If it went to court, that I would be an accomplice. So when I heard about it happening over Facebook, then I knew.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that tone?
When I heard,
yeah.
I knew he was trying to do everything possible, and that's the basis of our relationship, is that we're madly in love with this planet and want to do everything we can do to protect it. So I knew that our lives would probably be changing after that action, but I was also feeling really grateful that he had a chance to do something that he felt like would work or be acting like it's an emergency. But the one thing that's fun, one day so there was a whole year that we had after the action where they were doing speaking events, and we were waiting, and we knew that he could get up to 23 years in prison. And so one day we were walking by a little store, and there were these little pillows in the window of, saying like dance like nobody's watching or whatever. And I said, what we need to do is we need to make these different kinds of pillows that say love like you're going to prison. And we could give them all to all of the direct action folks, that are facing prison time, because every day was it turned every day into a special day, because we didn't know if we were going to have what would happen after the sentencing. So
did you feel supported by the community when?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's the thing. The medicine for the grief is action and community. And yes, I was so supported just by so many loving friends. And
that reminds me when we were on our climate march and we were walking through Albuquerque, and there was a big rally there for us, and a lot of Indigenous folks came, as well as local folks. And a 12-year-old Navajo girl stood up and gave a speech, and it was phenomenal. And the thing that I remember so clearly that she said was, the silver lining on the climate crisis is connection and community.
Yeah.
And that just, and I think we've all experienced that.
Yeah.
I think we've all experienced that. I have a question in the chat that I'm going to read out loud, and we'll see who wants to address it. This is from Charlang, who's one of my Granny friends. How does the new anti-protest laws in various states going to affect our movement?
I hope great. I hope actually that makes people so mad that we have to make fun of the law by everybody going out, and in protection of that, do it all together. It's dangerous for one or two people to do it, because then it works well for those people. But if it's such an outrageous number of people, what are they going to do? So it has to be go big in when that happens. It has to be, I feel like it has to be answered and not just ignored or
Like they said in the movie, 20 million people took to the streets in the first Earth Day. That's what we need.
Oh, yep.
20 million people. Anyway, what do you think about that, Michael? Same thing?
Same thing. I mean, there's the other piece. There's can you run somebody over with your car and get away with it if they're at a protest? There's that kind of repression. And then the other one is the judicial, which is saying, there's going to be some kind of mandatory minimum for looking at a pipeline, those kinds of laws. And I think both of them increase the risk to protesters, but in a sense, both of them make the point that this is effective and will. I mean, going to trial, like in Abby's case, I think it was so well portrayed. It's the willingness to be vulnerable, right? The willingness to say, I'm going to trust the judicial system. And jurors take that job so seriously. I mean, having been in several climate trial courtrooms now, jurors to a person are really, really serious about the job. So I think that, saying, what should happen to somebody like us? Does this person need to go to prison for 20 years? Is that going to keep us safe? I think jurors wrestle with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's my answer to the question.
Thank you.
It looks like there's another question.
Yeah, it is here. This is from Sonia Ediger, another Granny. And she says, do you think times have changed since social media? People can communicate in various ways. The violence on January 6th has altered my perception of crowd marches that get unruly.
Okay.
I'm not real clear about what she's asking.
Yeah.
But maybe perception of protesters may have changed because of the way they got so ugly in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who aren't like schooled in nonviolent civil disobedience,
Right.
what happened in DC looks like just another march, right? The one that, was really, really, really scary and upsetting, but there were all kinds of things that were different about what happened in DC. It wasn't just breaking windows. There was a very honest threat of hostage taking and trying to overthrow the government. And it was a completely different kind of experience than, you could have the Million Man March. What year was that? Like 20 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, something
And
like that. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't remember how many people showed up, but it didn't get any real coverage because it was a peaceful march. Nobody really, sadly, it didn't accomplish a lot because nobody got unruly. So there's this weird thing about pushing the edge of what is peaceful and what is disruptive. And I think that a lot of people who put together events spend a lot of time thinking about what's the maximum we can do to interrupt business as usual. And still be vulnerable, not be the aggressor, not be the one who is putting anybody in danger. Like in my trial, I was found not guilty of reckless endangerment, which was a complete surprise to me, because I really thought that the jurors would think I was a terrorist.
No, and I want to say one thing too about activism and organizing. If you're going to an event that has been organized by activists and there's really a clear reason that they're going and they know it's, they have things set up, there's always a safe zone for people that just want to show up and support. And the police will always be more than helpful to tell you where you can't go. And the people that are there who want to push the limit, who have come and they know, yes, I'm willing to be arrested and I'm going to do this. But normally there's totally a safe zone where people can just come and support the action and feel safe. Just like with the kayaktivism, I wasn't in a position that I could have been arrested because I work for a hospital and that wouldn't be good. So, but I could go out there and I could be one of the support kayaks, and then people like Michael would be the ones that would just go up and, ram the police boats. But I was still part of it and supporting it. So, yeah.
I want to say one quick thing. Roger Hallam at Extinction Rebellion talks about two essential elements of civil disobedience that make it effective. One is disruption. It has to actually disrupt something. And number two is vulnerability, that there has to be a sacrifice. When I am the one being sacrificed, I, the agent, the actor, the protester, am the one being sacrificed, it evokes the conscience of the community because I am standing up for what is right and I am putting myself at risk. If I am standing up for what is right and I am putting you at risk, I'm just a bully.
Good point. Yeah. That's a good segue into another topic I wanted to introduce, and then we've got another question we'll go to. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is, what is your advice for activist wannabes? And I'll throw in the first comment about that. I took 2 or 3 nonviolent direct action trainings before I did anything that was going to be possibly get me arrested. And I think that's essential. And it ties in with what you're talking about, Michael. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have support. You have to have backup. You have to have all kinds of things. And a lot of the big organizations and little offer those trainings. So what else you want to add to that? What is your advice for activist wannabes?
Just wannabes. Dive in, get connected to a community. it's not a lone wolf thing. I mean, that's one problem with the film is, to tell a human story, Joe wanted to focus on a handful of people because you couldn't fit all the people into the film who made those actions possible. Right? Not one of these happened in a vacuum. It was a ton of people involved to make any of those particular actions happen.
Right. I've given many talks to many groups since I finished walking across the country. It gave me what I like to call a ticket to talk.
Yeah.
And one thing I tell people, don't try and do it alone. Find your people, find your purpose, find your people, and do it together. What about you, Abby? What is your advice for?
Well, I can only tell, my advice would just be telling the story of how I actually got involved as a person that knew there was a problem but wasn't active. And I think my entry point was I got an email from inviting me to sign this Keystone Pipeline Pledge of Resistance. And so I signed up and they said, oh, well, so there's a meeting at this church. So I went to the meeting and there was a group of people and they said, well, guess what? You are going to be the trainers to train, you're going to train people that organize your group. So these, I meet all these people, I know nobody, but I didn't know that all of these people knew each other and they've been doing activism. They organized the WTO and all sorts of different things. They've been active for 20 years, but I did not know that they all knew each other. But that's where I met all these people that had so much experience. And I learned so much. I mean, I think that group of people, one of the things I really appreciated is they don't have this top-down organization. It's a very it's a very horizontal organization. So they invite you to step up in places and then they say, don't worry, we're all here to help you. But just practice and do this knowing we're all around you. And so that was really helpful, is just to learn from people that have been involved, because I had no idea what I was doing. But several months later, I was training people on how to be an activist and get involved in the Keystone Pipeline Pledge of Resistance. So that was so huge to have all the people that came before me teach me what to do.
Perfect. And you notice I'm wearing my Granny t-shirt.
Yeah, I love it.
My Climate March button, both of which involved group efforts. And I couldn't do what I do unless I did it with folks.
Yeah. Miriam, I had a question for you about how do you think your walk changed people or affected the situation? I'm so curious about that because 10 months is a lot of time. And you had mentioned that
8 months.
8 months is a long time to commit to. And I heard that you had walked like an average of 14 miles a day. That's amazing.
That was 15 and upwards.
15 and upwards.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how do you feel how was it for you? And do you feel like it was worth that time? Would you do it again?
Well, not at 78. I probably won't do it again, but at 71, I did. If I could go back and do it again at 71, I would do it again. And maybe do some things differently. I think we learned a lot as we went along. But to get to your question, Abby, when we were moving every day, we supposedly took one day off a week. We didn't call it a rest day. We called it a stay day because we had to do our laundry and go to rallies and give speeches and meet with groups and stuff. And we camped all the way. So we had all our worked and we cooked everything for ourselves. We did it all. Anyway, I think the thing that changed the most was us. We will never know our ripple effect, how much we impacted the people we saw. We handed out information all the way. We had a manifesto that I wrote in the middle of my tent one night early in the March because I wanted something to give to people. And I think people were impressed, and when they found out what we were doing, it interested them. And then when we had an opportunity to tell them why we did it, like that,
Yeah.
But there were a lot of folks who spewed their car exhaust from their diesels at us when they drove by, and gave us the one finger wave, like I said in the movie, and a couple places hassled us when we were camping. But it was a good community to be with, and
Can you
many
tell me
many folks were welcoming. We stayed in lots of homes along the way. We had a lot of support.
what states were you surprised that they were more welcoming? Were there
I
any
wasn't
surprises?
as familiar with the Southwest, and I will tell you the indigenous folks, the Zuni, the Navajo, the Pueblo people were wonderful to us. People along the way were wonderful, but I think they felt a special kinship to us because they recognized and identified with our mission.
Wow.
I'm going to get to the next question if we're ready to move on.
Okay.
And this is from Ed Fallon, a friend of mine who also happened to be the founder of the Great March for Climate Action. It's all his fault. Okay. He says, President Biden is taking real steps forward on climate change. Does that impact how we use social change tools like direct action and marching? In other words, do we still have to do it because Washington's finally acting?
Oh my gosh, no, I didn't hear that question. No. Okay, so that's my nightmare scenario, is that we would think that Washington's doing this, because not only are they not doing this, and not only are these real steps going to be absolutely the final nail in the coffin of all living things on the planet, but we're all going to be patting ourselves on the back and feeling really good about these steps we're taking that are going to commit everything that comes after us to certain doom. So, last week I learned 95% of endemic species on the planet face extinction this century.
Yeah.
Period.
It's incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible.
No, and that exactly. So the whole thing about like climate is that we can't even begin to wrap our brains around all the things that are going wrong. We got 1,000 studies coming out every month, and we still don't fully grasp it. So no, politics can't deal with this because people don't know what the problem is. It's like the house has burned down, or like a crowded theater, it's burning down. And, we elect somebody to stand up in front of us and say, hey, we're turning on some ventilation. So I think this is going to be all right. Meanwhile, everybody head out to the lobby and get yourself a little popcorn. But the theater's burning down. So I feel like direct action is tougher against the people who say climate is real, only because there's another football team out there that's saying climate isn't real. And they'll change their talk. Yeah. But they will not. They will do everything to prevent action. On our side, people are preventing action. On the climate left, there are lots of people who are blocking meaningful action. It's happening right now in Olympia here in Washington. Our governor, our greenest folks in the legislature are watering down mediocre bills just to get them through, just to get something done. It's a disaster. So yeah, there's no way anybody can talk about going to, for instance, carbon neutral by 2025. Nobody can say that in public. They can't say solid zero carbon by 2030. Can't say that. But if you remember, anytime Greta talks about this, she says, your Green New Deal is a joke. Your Green New Deal is a disaster for her generation. So we can either give up on life or we can give up on politics. I would choose to give up on politics. And so I think direct action is about forcing system change at any leverage point we can find. Anyway,
I'm more optimistic.
Okay,
But I
good.
totally, one thing that is, I totally agree with Michael is that with Biden's plan, so many people have come up to me and said, aren't you so happy? This is so great. And so it feels like people can take themselves off the hook and
Yes.
say, oh, that's solved. We're going to get back in the Paris Agreement. We're going to do this and that. But actually, the Trump administration crushed and turned back so many things.
Yeah.
And even the Department of Ecology literally had to hide their data, protect it from being destroyed forever, and hid under a bush. I went to a protest and there was an ecology person, a local ecology person that was in tears, when we're doing the March for Science, like thinking how low can it get? And my hope is that because of that oppression, they have a renewed sense of urgency and that they get to do their work again and that they're more inspired. I also would say living under a climate governor, we spent a lot of time poking him. And so he definitely, I think, felt like I can't satisfy anybody because I've got these business interests where I have to pretend that I don't. And I have these climate people. And we did harass and poke him and embarrass him for certain things and called him out. But I do think that the job is to put more tension on people, like put some tension. Don't put all your eggs in that basket, but there are people out there that love politics so much. They can be the pokes while other people do the other things, but we cannot rest on those laurels. And we still have to create that tension and show how it's not going to work. The math doesn't work. But I would also say the other thing that is optimistic for me is that if you just look at the math and the numbers, it is so dark. You can just say, and there's days when I just want to say, forget this. I'm just going to live knowing that only, maybe 3 generations and the third one is going to have a really terrible time, maybe 2. It's not looking good. But I think what's helpful and important is to have a faith or a spiritual muscle as much as you do the other things. So whatever spiritual way to work with, knowing that there is, for me, a life force or a higher power, that I'm in partnership with some kind of mystery to creation. So I commit to, well, I'm a Presbyterian, so I love Jesus. And what that means is you partner with something and love fiercely. That's all Jesus had to say. And Jesus, actually, I'm not going to go on. I'm sorry about Jesus, but was an example to people that as a brown-skinned immigrant, homeless person, there's so much that it's those lowly people that are powerful. That's the story, is that us who think we have no power do have more power than we think. So that example of the Prince of Peace is an ordinary guy. So, okay.
Yeah, but you don't have to apologize for Jesus. He was one of us, The rebel, he was a rebel, he was a tyrant. He went against the powers.
Yes.
Yeah. I have another question here.
Got mad.
I have another question on here from Carmen Hunter Siegert, who, full disclosure, happens to be my niece who lives in Denver. How old were each of you when you first started being concerned about the environment, and what was the trigger that got you actively engaged? Who'd like to take that one? Hi, Carmen.
Yeah. How about you, Miriam?
Mine was gradual. I belonged to the Sierra Club for 40, 50, I don't know, long time. And I started seeing things about what they were drawing, bringing up to the public attention in their monthly magazine or whatever. And I started getting concerned, so I started paying attention.
Yeah.
And the more I paid attention, the more I got concerned. And I think the event for me, and I think probably for many people, is that first step outside of your comfort zone. I'm thinking about what Bill says. Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
I went to Nebraska for a protest at the KXL pipeline to support the energy barn they were building on the route of the KXL pipeline to protest the pipeline. And I learned a lot, and I came home ready to jump in.
Nice. So I actually learned about climate in high school. In a weird story, I was on the debate team freshman year, 1978 or something, and in Houston, Texas, was doing well, and a rival team had pity on us poor freshmen and handed me a piece of evidence. It was a report from some Exxon scientists who said humanity has 5 to 10 years to wean themselves off of fossil fuels before we begin to lose control of this thing. And, we thought this was nuts. But I didn't really believe that or do anything about it for 10 years until I heard James Hansen of NASA testifying in Congress in the 80s. And that was the 10 years that the Exxon scientists said we had to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. So now it's 10 years later, and I'm hearing this guy in Congress saying we have an emergency. So even though it was like another 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, before I did anything about it, besides be a green consumer, it was the constant drip, 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 and knowing, like, in 1998, like, why aren't people like not buying cars anymore? I didn't understand why people were still buying cars in 1998. That was crazy. Temperatures shot up through the roof. We had El Nino, on and on. So it was all that, like, inconvenient truth. The Deepwater Horizon disaster wrecked me because I was from Houston. And then I went to an Al Gore training, and that training to go give a slideshow, I started taking it into schools, and I just went to every school, every classroom, every church, and I talked to about 10,000 people. Yeah. Hearing myself deliver the science, deliver the impacts, and say, here's 5 things you can do. Here's 5 groups in town. There's some emergency action coming up in Congress next week, whatever. That is what actually radicalized me, because I was actually hearing myself every day talking to these students and looking in their faces, and they're looking at me like, I was interrupted twice. Twice somebody jumped up out of their seat and said, "Why aren't the adults doing anything?" And they were panicked. And I'd helped get this, kid group going for climate justice, and help get this lawsuit going against the state for a livable future for kids. But, every day I was out there talking to students and realizing these people depend on us, and we are not going to get it done this way. So that's what sent me over to direct action. It was a long journey. 1978 until 2015. Don't wait. That would be my message. Don't wait.
We don't have time.
Yeah, we don't have time.
Yeah, and when I started reading the books, McKibben's books, and the one you mentioned, who was a professor in Iowa, Jim. Now I'm blanking on his name. Jim
Hansen.
Thank you. Yeah, and I started educating myself, and I took that seriously. Abby, how about you? Was it the train blow up?
Well, I would say my first heartbreak was in high school. I had a writing class, and we had to pick a controversial topic, or a topic that's related to issues, social issues. And I chose to research and write about the forest devastation of the Amazon forest. And I dedicated my paper to, like, I forget how many acres per minute were being chopped, slashed, and burned because McDonald's was using the forest floor for for their cows, which then can't even be replanted because it doesn't work that way. And I was so devastated, but I just made me sad and I felt powerless. And I also was thinking, what are the adults doing about it at that time?
Yeah.
But when I gave birth to my daughter, that was it. As soon as I pushed her out and she was in the world, I felt very responsible for what was happening.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is from Kathy Burns. How can people who absolutely are not in a position to get arrested, for example, losing a job would devastate a family structure or security, how can they be supportive of movements that involve direct action? I'll start with that one. I mentioned a while ago that when you take the direct action training, there's various roles to play: a legal role, a support role, a role for taking care of people's stuff if they get arrested, a role for raising bail. There's all kinds of roles to play. There's always something to do. It's usually just a very small percentage of the people in an action who actually get arrested.
Right.
What else do you want to add to that, folks?
I would say, I'm going to say something funny, maybe not exactly funny, not a joke. Back to that idea of sacrifice. I think that the film probably starts with Abby because she's got that wonderful moment where she says it's going to take a mom going to jail. And I think that the more sacrifice is involved, the more it is unacceptable to society that that this continue, that these people, not just that these people be punished, but that the system that is doing the bad thing is condoned or allowed to go on in society. So, you know, you take a stand against something that's just wrong. And if there's a sacrifice or vulnerability involved, now I'm not saying that everybody should just go, you know, sacrifice their careers, but I think that in this moment, especially in a police state where everybody carries guns, you know, the people and the police are all like arms to the teeth, and, you know, it's a scary, and the judicial system is screwed up and racist, and the prison systems are just a disaster. You know, yes, we want to minimize the amount of people going to prison, and we want to minimize the amount of hurt and sacrifice. But at the same time, if there is none, people don't care. So anyway, that's what I would say about that.
How about you, Abby?
Yeah, I would definitely say what's great about an affinity group or a group that's going to do an action, everyone does say, like, if someone says, I absolutely cannot be arrested, the whole group will make sure that you are gone if they feel any threat or they see anything happening. But there's also offsite things to do. And my job, the action before I got arrested was I was in like the cheer team. So I was like, you know, leading people in chants or singing, and the fun committee. So like, as soon as the police said, you know, if you're in this area, you're going to get arrested, I'm going to give you one warning. And so we absolutely ran and screamed louder from the edge, from where we asked them, you know, where's the edge where we can be? And they pointed to it. And then we just did that. So it's really amazing when I first participated in these actions to actually be there too. Knowing, just seeing the whole thing and being in partnership with people. So if you can be there and witness what's happening,
show up.
That is so powerful. And like I said earlier, during the action, the people that were so moved by how much we loved each other and supported each other. So like I said, the firefighters and the police were all just so moved by, and there was so much respect by everybody. And not everybody is like that, I gotta say all over the country, it's so, please know each group and who they are and kind of the MO.
Sure.
Not always, but like we did this action in a bank for Chase to not fund fossil fuel projects, the Keystone. And we actually did a prayer service inside the church, and the policemen actually put their arms behind the back and didn't want to disturb our prayer service. They like, usually they just chat amongst themselves, but they were like, and then the guy comes in, a customer comes in and he goes, wait, I thought this was a bank. Is this a church? And so it was this funny thing, but the police were so reverent in this space because we took over the space and changed the energy of the place.
She's not telling you half the story. I was there, and that was the most amazing action you did, Abby. There's like 3 great stories from that bank action. And yes, and your action, I was on the bridge watching you on the tripod, and you are definitely one of the people who inspired me to cross that line and say, yeah, it's time. It's time. So yes, show up for these events, show up for each other. You don't have to put yourself at risk the first few times until you feel like, you need to risk something.
And I think I just need to say that if I have white skin, I have privilege to be able to have these kind of experiences at these type of events, because if I had dark skin, I would not be treated the same way. And so having gray hair and white skin, I have much more of a responsibility to get out in the front. That's what I believe.
Yes, I was confident going into trial in North Dakota because I'm an old white guy.
Yeah.
And so like these people aren't going to want to put a white guy in jail. It's North Dakota. It's all white people out there to them. The only people in jail, that's indigenous people. That's brown and black people. So yeah. And not to say that North Dakota is racist. We're all racist.
We're all racist. And I was at Standing Rock 3 times.
Yeah.
And I saw some of the devastation happen up there. And I was up in British Columbia at the Unistoten Action Camp, where they were trying to keep Enbridge from drilling the pipeline across their unceded native lands. And they told us the week I was up there, we're safer when you white folks are here, from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in their incursions into where we are.
So
yeah.
true.
So that's an example of using your white privilege for good, which we I think are accountable to do. I have another question. And this is from somebody we all know well, Mr. Joe Gantz, who made this movie. He says, do you think that we can use this film and all of our, I'm having trouble seeing this. Do you think we can use this film and all of your inspiring stories to energize people to jump in and take action for a livable future? I don't think that's a question for us. I think that's a question for this audience. What do you think?
Thanks, Miriam. Yeah, and thanks, Joe.
I would like to invite whoever's watching this on the chat, and I probably know a great many of you, just put 1 or 2 words down about how this movie impacted you and whether it has inspired you to get out of your comfort zone. And if we've already done that, maybe to do more and to not hold back. It's no time to hold back. So
yeah, I just want to say one thing about that is we had a panel in the UK, and Extinction Rebellion there is just, they're doing amazing things, absolutely amazing things. The organizer said, you know what, we've been in lockdown for a year, we've been kind of lazy and we need to get motivated again. And I saw this film and it fired us up. And so they are taking this as like, yes, these ordinary people can do something. So let's take this energy and this excitement and like get re-involved after like a year of being isolated. So
yeah, and so make a commitment and tell somebody, have an accountability buddy, somebody that you will watch the movie with, or find another movie. There's so many great documentaries now that are, pointing all in the same direction. But what is it that you're willing to risk? Because at this point, we're going to have to break some things. Let's face it. There's no amount of incremental, regulation or, cap and trade or anything that's going to save us from poisoning ourselves and everything we love into oblivion. So we're going to have to break some things. If we don't break some things, we're breaking everything. So the sooner we break things, the better. And what is it that you're willing to risk? And what is your vulnerability that you're willing to share with the world? What's your commitment level to this place that gives us everything we are?
Yeah, and I mean, this movie is a good tool for, if you were inspired by it, to share it with all your friends, invite them to watch it, and then all of a sudden you have this affinity circle of these people that that are you're inspired by and can actually do something. So I do feel like this is a good tool for, like, your first action or first thing you can do is share this movie with your friends, and then you're all on the same page. You can have a discussion like we're having right now. And I mean, that's a great launching place.
Oh, Cynthia. Yes. 90-plus-year-old granny who read me the riot act when I got back from North Dakota. She was so angry with me when she saw me. She said, "Why didn't you ask me to get involved?" And every time I saw her after that, she would always come up to me. She'd say, "I'm still angry with you. I'm still angry with you." And I think about that now, and I think, like, 5 years from now, what are you going to be upset with yourself that you didn't do? Like, climate's not going to get any better in the next 5 years. So if you can find some people who will help create action and create resistance, create change,
Yeah.
do it now. Don't wait. Yeah.
And I just want to say one quick thing. I think that we have to just really be clear that the problem that we have is that we're using oil, coal, and gas, and that we have all of this CO2 that's up in the atmosphere already. And so that we really need to be clear about what a carbon footprint is. What does that really mean? And then take responsibility personally. How am I putting stuff up there, and then this CO2, and then politically, I need to also be making sure that I am putting pressure on the political leaders to reduce the carbon footprint. And professionally, I need to go to my workplace and I need to say, where can we reduce our carbon footprint, and my purchases. So this is a really simple problem. It's that we have to stop using oil, coal, and gas. And maybe the biggest thing that you do that is the most painful thing for the planet isn't getting arrested, but it's saying, I'm not going to fly on an airplane this year.
Right.
Because
Never
we
again.
really proved it during 2020. If people don't fly, they don't have as many flights. They cut them out. People always say, well, the plane's going there anyway. Well, in 2020, it wasn't, and we
That's
proved
true.
it. So, yeah,
That's-
we have to
that's
take
good.
responsibility.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have we've just got a few minutes left here.
Okay.
And I'm enjoying this enormously. We could probably go on till midnight, but we're not
Yeah.
allowed.
Great fun.
And so here's what this question looks like. And this is relative to the action that you took. I'm going to ask you in 1 or 2 words to tell me what was your scariest moment, your happiest moment, your greatest sacrifice, and your biggest regret. We'll go through one at a time.
Okay.
Okay, so Abby, what was the scariest moment for you?
Speed round.
Pardon me?
Speed round, lightning round. Okay, go ahead, Abby.
It was being on the stand during the trial.
Michael?
For me, scariest moment, I just knew that they were gonna be waiting for us when we pulled up to the pipeline valve. I knew that, I was not gonna get to turn off that valve. And they were gonna haul me off to jail before I got to shut off the oil.
And they weren't there.
They weren't, they didn't.
So for me, this sounds a little silly, but the scariest moment, I was elected mayor of the Great March for Climate Action. I'd get up and talk in front of people, which I never did before. Well, that maybe wasn't the hardest moment for me was on a 23-mile day in Pennsylvania where the road goes like this. And I was sick. And I walked 23 miles and I could hardly stand up. That was both scary and hard, but I persevered. Okay, next question. What was your happiest or most joyful moment? Abby?
The whole action, the whole day.
The whole day. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Michael.
it was happy. What was happy about it is I felt so alive, and all of the emotions I had, whether they were happy or worried, that was what made me happy, is I felt fully alive and I felt like I was in the right place and I felt super powerful. So that's what it is.
Michael.
Absolutely that. I think that I had probably a year and a half of happiest moments. So I even had some happiest moments while I was in prison, which is a stupid place, but and then certainly coming home from prison was pretty unbelievable. So yeah, just there's nothing like it. I could never put it into words.
I think my happiest moment, well, there were lots of them, but you saw in the film how joyful it was being in New York City at the People's Climate March, where there were 400, almost 500,000 people in the streets marching for climate. That was my happiest moment on the march. Certainly a lot of happy moments with friends and connections, and you get to know somebody really well when you walk with them and camp with them and eat with them and suffer with them through blizzards and thunderstorms and tornadoes chasing you and deserts for 8 months. But I'll point to New York as the most uplifting. Okay, what was your greatest sacrifice?
We have a message that we need to start wrapping up.
Oh yeah, it's time.
Okay. All right, quickly. Your greatest sacrifice. 2 words, Abby.
I think seeing my family so worried. My mom it nearly killed her. She was so worried about me. So I think the loved ones that were kind of having to worry about me, which I wasn't worried about me, but it impacts your loved ones.
Okay, how about you, Michael?
I'll pass.
Okay, you're gonna pass.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna answer for you. A year in prison was a pretty darn big sacrifice. Yeah, okay. We're being told that we need to say thank you and good night and wrap up.
Thanks to anybody who watches this film and shares it with other people you love. And thanks, Joe, for making the film.
Special shout out to Grannies.
Grannies.
Grannies are so powerful.
Yes.
Grannies are